I'm Lori Timoney, and this is the Experience.This.Travel show. We have some very exciting guests today, especially in honor of Women's History Month. I'll let them introduce themselves, but why don't we first start with our co-host. Bruce, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Lori, and excited to chat with you, Nikki and Beth. Bruce Rosard here. I'm one of the co-founders of Arrival. Christian?
Yeah, I thought you were going to tell us where you are, Bruce, but we can go back to that.
I am in New Orleans, apparently on a very special day. We'll let Beth tell us about this special day that I wasn't even clear was why we're here. We're just here to. Someone said, "Why are you in New Orleans?" Eat great food and listen to great music. That's why we're here.
There's a good reason for that. A very good reason.
Yeah, you had a chance to say you knew all about it, and you've done your research, and you've asked some humans, and you could have done all of that stuff. But no,
I asked ChatGPT, and I didn't get a lot. So anyway, go ahead.
So you have humans to ask that.
Talking about AI on this show, right?
Yeah. Well, anyway, I'm home, as you could probably see. Christian, CEO of Magpie. Yeah, going to be home. Well, I've got a quick New York trip next week for Focusrite AI and marketing. My next trip was supposed to be Abu Dhabi and Riyadh in 10 days, but that's not looking very good right now. So, yeah, happy to be here and excited to have this talk today.
Super. Beth, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. Thank you all so much for having me. My name is Beth Santos. I am one of the co-organizers of the She Shapes History New York, our new walking tours that we're doing right in Midtown Manhattan. By trade, I am also an entrepreneur in the travel space. I run an international women's travel community called Wonderful. We run trips and we have meetups and we have a whole member community supporting women worldwide. And we also have a really large creator network. So we run a conference called WITS, which is for travel content creators. We host the annual Bessie Awards that honor women of impact in travel. And I also wrote a book on solo travel. So I'm a little bit of my hands in many pots here, but no, really excited to talk more about the tour, and I'll hand it on over to my business partner, Nikki.
I'll upgrade us, Beth. I'm going to say I'm co-owner of She Shapes History New York City.
I love it. I know. Did you see me pause? I was like, what do we say? I know we're so
early
new.
stages,
So
hence our titles. And I, by trade, I like that. By trade, I am actually director of brand and content strategy at Walks and Devour Tours. So my world is tours, walking tours, and has been since I started in travel, actually.
I love that you're both doing so many things.
We both also have young kids.
We're both moms. I mean, it's a mom thing, I think, to be totally honest.
Yeah, the whole multitasking thing is very ingrained right from the start. But I do love the fact that you're doing so many things. I mean, you've built this community. Well, both of you have, but you've obviously built this community that is, just growing and growing. So you've got this audience, and I'd love to know what kind of brought you to the place where you decided to tackle the tour business. Obviously, Nikki, you're very much ingrained in that world. But it's interesting to me that you kind of decided to launch into the tour space. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. I'm sure we all would love to hear a little bit more about that. And also She Shapes in general, starting in Australia or coming from Australia. How does that work?
Nikki, do you want to tackle this one?
We have two different versions of the story, actually 3 different versions if you count Sita in Australia. I'll tell mine. I was connected with Sita Sargent, who opened She Shapes History in Australia about 4 years ago, at the very beginning of her journey. So again, I've always been in tours and we are connected, and I've been very emotionally invested in her business. She did not come from tours at all. She just one day had learned that the capital of Australia, Canberra, the capital was designed by a woman. And she was in her 20s at this point. And she was like, how have I, as like a feminist local Canberran, have never heard this fact? Like, this is crazy. And she started looking into what else have we not heard in Australian history and what history is really hidden and needs to be shared. And so she started tours as a means to tell these stories. Like, what better way to tell stories than tours? So she opened this up with no tour experience. I cannot stress that enough. And 4 years later, it has blown up. I mean, she's now expanded to 5 cities. Her goal is to hit 10 by the end of the year, I believe, her roadmap. She is full-time for the past 2 years. She has 3 full-time staff members. She's getting like huge politicians messaging her on Instagram. She's getting major institutions like their version of the Library of Congress asking her to create tours for them. It's amazing. The response has been amazing. So Sita was traveling through the States, and she passed through New York City. We got to meet in person, and she was just kind of mentioning to me, you know, I'm thinking about expanding outside Australia. Like, what would that look like? Do I franchise? And in my memory, I was like, you have to meet Beth. Beth is, you know, you've heard her list. She's like an adult entrepreneur is how do I refer to her. Like, she runs businesses. She went to business school. She knows what she's doing. I was like, Beth would be perfect, obviously, with Wonderful as well. She has the connection to women, and it's right up her alley. So you need to meet with Beth. And so they met up, and Sita mentioned it. Didn't mention it. Do you want to take it from there, Beth?
I just like love hearing how you explain this story, because it does feel so serendipitous in some ways, and in other ways so right. You know, I think Nikki coming from the tour industry and having so much passion for supporting women. And that has been such a huge part of her work. You know, we've known each other professionally for years because she's always running coaching masterminds in our member community and coming to WITS and helping people out. And so, so when she sent Sita over my way, it's actually funny because Nikki, I haven't told you this, but a couple years ago, I was reached out to by a friend who works in tourism in New York. And she was like, you should have walking tours in New York. And I was like, absolutely not. That's just not, like, that is a whole other business. I'm not going to get into that right now. I've got so much going on. But when I sat down with Sita and heard her story and specifically what she's trying to do, that just turned a page in me, just in a different way. You know, I'd never thought about a walking tour in quite the way that she had built them. And so then started talking with Nikki about, well, what do you think about this idea? Is this something that should be brought to the US? And I think at some point we sort of realized maybe it's the two of us that actually should be doing this. Like, maybe this is us. And the rest is history.
So is it a
What's
franchise?
the third version? You said there were 3 versions, right? Nikki's
Well,
version,
Sita's version too. I
version.
forget, but there's something different about. We all disagree on like who recommended to who and who reached out to who and why, but we it's whose idea was it, essentially, is I think what we disagree
Right.
on.
Who was the person who was like, let's actually do this?
Spark.
Yeah, we don't really remember.
Got it. And
So
you didn't
is it-
mention you also run a cafe in Boston, right?
Oh,
I
yeah.
do.
That's
I
important.
do. You know, I figured there was like a good stopping point that would just not overwhelm people. But yes, it's true. I own, which is kind of neat because I think the tour operation and tour guiding industry is kind of like a hybrid between a digital business like Wonderful and a cafe. You know, and because you're bringing, people are doing bookings online. The main way you're often reaching people is online, but then the experience is very much an analog experience, right? So I thought that was kind of neat. Like, I never really thought about it that way until I started getting into it. And then I was like, oh my gosh, this is like a total analog experience that people find and book online.
Yeah.
That's what it is, right?
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I really need to visit your cafe. I'm that's going to be on
Come
my
on
list
by.
of things to do because I'm a local, so to speak. But you know, I'm wondering. So, is it a franchise model? The business?
Nikki's, yeah. Yes, I think right now we're really we're figuring it all out. You know, it's been really kind of fun to be able to come in at such an early phase where She Shapes History has really reached a lot of traction in Australia, but hasn't made it to the US yet. And I think as Nikki and I have been really thinking about this, so the first thing is right now, we're doing a pilot. We're doing a pilot during the spring, launch during Women's History Month. It's technically a partnership between my company, Wonderful, and She Shapes History. That's kind of how that gives us the freedom and the flexibility to test it out on the books to kind of make sure that we're doing things right. I think a franchise model is definitely what we're looking at. We could see this expanding quite a bit in the US. And I think that in terms of the way She Shapes History as a business wants to expand, something like a tour guide or a tour operation, you need to have locals, in the lead, I think in a lot of the time. So I think she also understands that this is a fundamentally American company that we're building here in the US. And to be able to have that kind of leadership is really important. And it's something that she's really created this great mentality and given us a lot of her own insights and lessons so that we're not just building another She Shapes History, but we're building our own version of that.
I want to clarify that because it sounds like you're still trying to figure it out, but it's important, I think, for the audience and for what you guys are trying to do. When you say, is it a franchise? The answer might be yes. The one in New York you might have as a franchise to She Shapes History Australia. But are you also saying, well, we might do a franchise for the US and end up with one in Boston and one in Philly and one in San Francisco?
I think the way we would do it is it's a US franchise. And then the cities are owned by She Shapes History US.
By that franchise.
Yep, exactly.
Right. So you wouldn't bring in other franchisees as owners.
No, I think that becomes a little meta. It's like a franchise within a franchise model. Yeah, I think we would, and we'd like to have, not to say we want control, but I think like there's things that we can build together in the US without necessarily going into the full franchise model here.
Yeah.
So yes, I think we'd own each of the components within the US, but then the US itself would be a franchise of the Australian business.
And I assume that Walks is fine with this, Nikki. I mean, you're kind of competing with Walks a little bit.
1,000%. I am, I brought it to my direct manager, who is Lauren, who I believe you've all talked to at some point on the show. And I was like, so I'm thinking about opening up New York City walking tours. She's been very supportive. They've all been very, very supportive. It actually serves both ways very well because Walks and Devour is this huge company doing attraction tours, doing food tours in major cities. These are things that you're capturing, hopefully, the every traveler. And it is such a different model and it's such a different audience. And it's so interesting to obviously take what I know there and apply it. And that's a lot of my base industry knowledge. But to do the reverse, to take She Shapes History, which is talking to such a niche audience, and to be able to see what works and what doesn't, and be able to actually test and say, wait, this type of content, for example, like social media marketing works so well in something like She Shapes History because it is so niche. And the core of the value offering is already differentiated, but it's such a value base. Like it is not come and take our tours. We don't need to post about that ever on Instagram, for example. We just need to share these stories of women, and people are so eager to get more. We can actually put our exact tour offering online, which is so different. We don't have that ability at Walks and Devour. So it's very interesting. I'm taking lessons from both, and it's really serving both sides.
It seems like sorry, go ahead, Christian.
I got a question, but a statement first. I think maybe I do that. I do a statement, then a question. Is that normal? I feel like I
You do it every way you want. Yeah.
I'm gonna research that and see if that's normal. Anyway, I was just thinking. I don't think this is the point, but the stuff you're digging into there, Bruce, is quite interesting. The franchise versus corporate versus. It'd be an interesting study to see because I spent a lot of my life at City Sightseeing, which was a license. And I'd spend half my life thinking about this stuff. Is this the best way to structure it versus Big Bus, which is corporate? You got Urban Adventures, you got Walks. It'd be interesting to see which ones, and people like Justin Buzzy, to see which ones have made it and to see the best method for growing this stuff. That's my statement. That'd be a good deep research thing to go have it just go out and find all these different.
Oh, you knew it.
We have to talk about it.
Yeah, I know. No,
it would be a good research thing because sometimes both work, or sometimes this definitely better than this one. Like McDonald's works, so does Starbucks. Different things. Anyway, but Nikki, you said it's niche, but why is this so niche?
Because it is a very singular topic. I can describe in one sentence, like our tours share the hidden history of women. Full stop. That is what it is. That is what the experience is. The goal of the tour is to share those stories. There's nothing more to it.
You know what's also very unique, and I think that Nikki is saying, "Oh, She Shapes History and Walks compete." I actually don't think they compete at all from a business perspective, because what She Shapes History is doing is not actually a tourism experience at all. And what I mean by that is when you go on a tour, and it's one of those things where you kind of have to go on to experience it. But when you go on a tour, we are not telling you anything really about what's around you. We're not giving you place context in the same way that a tour would. We're not saying like, now we're going to take you on 50th Street, which you may know as the, whatever, here's this building. It was built in this time. Like, let me show you the architectural details. We're not doing any of that. We're kind of taking you to places. And actually, that's kind of a big part of the story, because we say, look, a lot of these women have been almost completely undocumented, which means you're not going to see a building that was constructed for her, and you're not going to see a statue, and you're not going to see a plaque, so we're going to take you along these streets, and we're going to try to take you to places that are maybe connected to her story, streets she may have walked on. But at the end of the day, we're not introducing you to this place. We're just using the place as a subtext for storytelling. And so the people who go on these tours, there's actually a lot of locals and a lot of people who will come back again and again as we change the stories. Now let's tell you about, famous Latino women. Let's tell you about mothers and daughters. Let's tell you about, different women in different contexts. And so I think the audience, while it still can be a traveling audience, it tends to be people who are just looking for a different experience than something they've had before, a different story than something that they already know.
That's such a good point. In Australia, I would say it's 95% locals, a non-tourist demographic, and it's people, they do these pop-up tours, as Beth was inferring. So for, this is not their case, but for Hispanic historic Hispanic month, if we were to do a pop-up for 4 weeks there, if we were to do a pop-up for 4 weeks over another holiday, that's how they do it there. And so people go back again and again. You have repeat customers on a walking tour. It's really in its own category. And it's been interesting to me. I've been doing a lot of the B2B business, like literally knocking on people's doors. I joined the New York City Tourism Accelerator and am now a member of New York City Tourism. And they've been so wonderful and helpful. And it's actually been interesting to me that there is that B2B interest. Obviously, affinity groups, right? That's a huge one. ERG groups, schools, that seems more obvious. People are looking for an after work thing to do that feels engaging, that feels important, but doesn't involve drinking, for example, even though we have a drinking version as well. But international, I guess we've had some people, we're doing all these FAMs. We're really doing it by the books. And we've had quite a lot of interest from people who have international travelers. And they've said to me, I'm like, isn't this too specific? Like, what are they going to care about these specific women who did these things? And they were saying right now, there's such an appetite to answer the question, what is happening in the US? And these groups are looking for something new. These companies are looking for something new to present to their clients. So this is actually a very attractive subject, because it's not polarizing. We can all get on board that we should support women more, right? There's no politics about it in that sense. And then it's also kind of giving them a new, fresh look at answering these questions. Like, maybe if I can understand the contributions of these women and why they haven't been included, maybe that will give me some clues as to what's happening today. So I've been very surprised actually at the more traditional tourism interest.
It's really interesting, the points you bring up there. I could 100% see all of that in terms of, number one, not polarizing, something new to bring up, the opportunity to, engage with locals, because I could see when you first mentioned positioning it separate to a regular tour, Beth, it was hard to envision, but then as you started going into a bit, it makes a lot of sense. I find it really interesting that both of you kind of bring an audience to this, right? You've got your audience of creators, women, you have this base that you're bringing to this, tour business. And it's almost like it the way that it I don't know if landed on you or whatever you want to say, it fits together so well. And it's, we talk about creators. I mean, obviously huge, just a huge part of our ecosystem now. And do you envision like there's this world where creators are the new tour operators? Like, they're the ones that are going to be developing the products, and they bring the audience first before so instead of starting with the product, you start with the audience and then you go from there.
Oh, it's already happening. Absolutely. I think that is very much what can happen. And I think what's happening in the creator landscape is that they're learning how to start businesses. They're learning how to monetize, but they're also learning, as every entrepreneur does, what they are uniquely good at and what they like to do. So it's not going to be every creator that's going to start a walking tour, but it is going to be some that are saying, wow, the thing I actually really love about being creator is being to connect intimately with my followers, or being able to show people places, or being able to tackle logistics, and those, yeah, absolutely. I think that can happen. I think it's definitely interesting that you mentioned both of our audiences, because I remember when I was in business school, I went to Kellogg out of college and did a couple of years and then went to business school. And I still remember one of my professors saying that actually, statistically speaking, at least at the time, the most successful business founders were in their 40s. And I was like 25, and I'm like, whatever. How is that possible? And here I am
dead by then,
turning 40 this year. And I'm like, you know what? I get it. I actually understand, because you have an established network. You have people that want to support you. You have connections. You have maybe an audience, depending on what you're doing. You have a lot of things that for other people who are much younger takes a long time to build that foundation. And so I do credit the fact that Nikki and I have a lot of industry background and experience and connections, that it's been maybe easier than it would have been if we were fresh out of college, just to be like, oh, hey, I know somebody who actually could do a write-up on this, who would love this story. Let me go pitch it to her. And that's been really, really nice as we've been building this out.
Yeah. And you also have the experience, which
of course
the 25-year-old MBA thinks they know everything, and they don't. And by now you guys know you don't know everything. But
Amen.
By 40, you kind of learned a lot. Yeah, for sure. You mentioned just one thing on creators. It's hard for a creator to become a tour operator. So Tour Radar has done something super interesting. If you're not aware, you should look it up. They've created what they call hosted trips, and they make it an opportunity for a creator to come on a Tour Radar designated trip and be the host of that trip. So they can just get part of their following. If they get 6 people, they go for free on that trip. So the tour operator doesn't have to give a free trip to a creator based on the creator saying, oh, I'm going to go out and do all these posts and blah, blah, blah. But I'll bring along 5 friends, and that makes it work. And Tour Radar makes that work, so that the creator now is actually, a tour operator, even though they're not running the tour. There's still an actual tour being run. And I don't know if that's being done in the one-day experiences yet.
This has been going on for a long time, right? Creators have been in the tour business without realizing it for at least 3-4 years. I pretty much begged Wonderful a few years ago to let me do this mastermind, because I kept running into these creators, and they were a tour operator. They were literally reaching out to DMCs. They were booking hotels. They were entering into all these things without contracts. And, they'd have all these basic questions of they're requiring me to, pay at 30 days, but I don't have the money in my bank account. And I'd be like, oh, you're a tour opera's and you just have no idea.
You don't even know it.
You have no idea. So I asked Beth, and we went through all that. I mean, Tour Radar does it. Trova Trip. That's their whole model, right? Intrepid was doing that also for a very long time, where they'd sort of whitelisted tour. But I think what a lot of it fits for some creators, but there was a whole group of creators that were like, no, I want to change the tours. And a lot of these companies say you can edit it. You can't really edit it. It just wouldn't be a good business model. So they are going off on their own. They're like, I've been on these fam trips. I have these direct contacts at these DMCs and these tourism boards. And so they've been running these tours on their own as an outbound operator with zero support, zero background. I mean, in those workshops for Wonderful, I was literally giving them here's how you price. They have no idea how to price a trip. They have no idea what a margin is. They don't know the difference between revenue and profit. It's it almost scratched my itch, because I was so stressed about them out in this world. And they were always complaining about the DMCs, and the DMCs are complaining about them. Oh, you guys aren't speaking the same language. So this has been going on for a long time. I just think the industry is slowly catching up on formalizing this and acknowledging that those are 2 different worlds, and there needs to be a lot of education on both sides for how to.
And S4.E4's doing that a lot now as well, right?
S4E4 as well. Oh yeah, they're a great example.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a good example of how a few different segments of the tourism industry are really trying to figure this out. I know you mentioned Tour Radar. I know Trova is also doing a similar thing. I just came across Rocket Place, which I hadn't heard of before, which basically allows you to create branded itineraries. So I could be like, this is Beth's way of traveling solo. Here's the plan, and I'm going to sell it to you, and you go travel on your own. So I think, and Fora had tried that. And I think one of the things that Fora also discovered was that sometimes they don't want to do the logistics. Sometimes being a creator is the thing that they like best. They like just inspiring their audience and they like giving ideas, but they don't like getting a call in the middle of the night because the person's having trouble. And so I think that is kind of to the point of figuring out what their skills are. Sometimes a tour radar or a Trova is absolutely perfect because all they want to do is, put their name on it, go on the trip and be able to add a workshop in the beginning and have their experience. And other times they really do want to have a much more branded, kind of deeper experience. And I think that is when they're moving into the space of, okay, now I'm actually a tour operator.
Yeah.
Right.
So that requires structure.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry.
Lauren.
No, I was just going to say that requires a structured approach, obviously. And so, is there that structured approach? I mean, I know you're doing some of that, Nikki. And we talked about, if you want to work with certain companies, you can get that benefit. But other than that, you have your schools for tour directors, right? Do we have a school for how do you become a tour operator?
Yes, right. There are a few. There's Kelsey, there's Mitch and Pete and Chris. Like they are out there. However, it is a very small audience compared to the amount of people that are entering that space. Like these creators have never heard of those schools that I've interacted with. They're not connected at all with the travel business. They don't know what a DMC is, even though they're emailing them. They're completely separate from the industry.
Well, because it's two segments of the industry that are now merging. They just never, they didn't have the language. They never thought kind of consciously, oh, now I want to be a tour operator. In fact, like your conversation made me think you need to have like a spin-off podcast where we just give you a list of creators and then you call them and it's like you ask them questions and then at the end you go, surprise, you're a tour operator. Like, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize, because I think, like as this industry evolves, so many of these things that previously were very separate are now really merging together. And we realize, oh my gosh, it is just maybe you're starting with an audience and then you're monetizing through activities. That's how Wonderful was built. We started as a blog, then we started to introduce events and then membership and then trips. And now, people say, what's your business model? And I have to spend 5 minutes kind of laying it all out because it's not just, like a cafe where you say, well, we buy coffee and then we sell coffee. What do you do? So. Yeah, it's evolving.
Christian, you were gonna jump in.
I was just saying, I mean, maybe we could give Brian Chesky some credit for inventing this whole thing. But I mean, this is what he thinks MB Experiences is, right? We all know it's not, but this is what he thinks. This is what he imagines it is. That everyone's got the little expertise in this niche or that niche, and they go out and just do tours without really being a tour guide. They're just kind of a host, walking people around. So it's. I think the concept is great, and we talk about authenticity a lot, but this is kind of the ultimate authenticity, right? Where you just kind of talk what you understand, and it's not about the Empire State Building. It's just local stories, which is great.
And also, this is a great example, She Shapes History, of sort of being in between those spaces, because I mean, I feel very strongly that I call it a walking tour, and we have walking tours on the website. Like, it is a walking tour. You're walking around, you're touring, getting information. And I feel like there's been such a push to get away from tours. Like, no, it's an experience. It's experiential. This is a walking tour. However, it is not a walking tour in the format that you typically see walking tours. So we've almost gone the full circle of, Brian Chesky's experiences on the ground. Like, we are taking that concept of what is an experience, but we're introducing a tour as an option for that experience, if that makes sense. So these locals who would never, ever take a walking tour of New York City, they would hop on this because the experience is a walking tour.
Yeah. And of course, remember, this being in New York, all the tour guides have to be licensed tour guides. So this is, there is like a formality to this for sure. But what Nikki said is true. And it's very interesting because, we kind of say, oh, well, this is really different from a walking tour. But at the same time, I think part of what we're trying to do here is sort of broaden people's expectations of what a walking tour might do, because this is what we're doing. We are taking you on a walk and we are pointing out things. Maybe they don't exist now, but they did 200 years ago. And we're trying to help you understand a place through stories. And that's what a walking tour is at the end of the day. Maybe some people just have more visuals and more props, but we're just really trying to help you look and see the world and digest the world in a new way.
So how many tours are you doing? Because I think it's still very limited, right? And Nikki, are you pretty much the tour guide at this point? Like you haven't scaled it off. Okay. Then correct.
She
Then
says
give
that
me.
with-
In fact,
I thought I read that somewhere in a post, but maybe that was a while ago.
No. So how we've kind of delegated it, like that's my background of designing tours and experiences. And I was a New York City tour guide for over a decade, have not done it for a long time, but I keep my license updated. It's very easy. Anyone can get their license in New York City. They don't like me saying that, but anyone can. So I have that license, so I can legally guide our tours. But we're doing all the research. As Beth said, this is not it's not casual, right? Even though it's a little bit different in the format. So these are very highly researched by me. A lot of time has been spent in telling these women's stories and the research, because what's interesting, these stories aren't told for a reason. Right? As Beth mentioned, there's a systemic issue, but there's also this practical issue of there's not a lot of resources. And the resources that we have are very skewed. How they're being talked about, they're very limited. You can't really verify. And there's sort of worldwide this sense amongst tour guides of, it has to be from this text or this verified author or this esteemed school of thought to be good enough to count as fact to put in a tour. It's very important. That's what tour guides learn in tour guide schools around the world to get your license. It's fact, fact, fact. So they put a lot of emphasis on sources. So here, we really are kind of going into it saying, hey, we've got the information that we have. We're putting in the context of where it came from when it was written. And we're putting in the good and the bad. Like, we're not here to give you the conclusion of whether these women were good and bad. The example Beth always brings up that I love is Martin Luther King Jr. We love praising Martin Luther King Jr. and he's done incredible things, but no one wants to talk about how he's had affairs. Right? Even the founding fathers, there's this real reckoning, especially in the United States, where it's like, well, we can't, do we tear them down? They've done these bad things, but some people are pushing back because they've also done good things. These are human beings who are imperfect. And so we really take a lot of effort to tell these stories as unbiased as we can. It is very short. It is 5 to 10 minutes per women. That talking about tour guides, it has been very hard to train tour guides on this tour. Because we could talk about this. We're passing that. It's like, to communicate something, you need to give them as little as possible, the bare minimum for them to get the point so that they can retain. So it's been really interesting to put them together and to train these guides, because no, Bruce, I am not going to be the sole tour guide of this. I can guide, and it's hard for me not to, because this is now absolutely my baby.
I have a little passion about this. I can see.
Yeah. We have three.
I cannot.
We have 3 guides now that have been training up and are going to be leading tours. And Nikki, I think, is underselling how actually formally researched this entire tour is. I know, because maybe, Nikki, you're doing the research that you're like, there's not, it's not as many data points as like, we know when the Declaration of Independence was written, like, obviously that's written in 1,000 different places. These maybe you're finding 5 sources, but they're very reputable sources, right? It's newspaper clippings in the New York Times so this is real information. And we're also coupling that with real quotes that these women have said, pictures of them. So we're passing them around and we're inviting the audience to read these things out loud and reflect on them. So it is very well researched and well documented. But just, I think what we try to do is invite a little bit of that analysis of, well, why do you think that, we don't know about this person before? And why do you think she has been left out of history so far?
So how many tours? Is it one?
Every weekend.
Badass Women of New York City is our core tour. And the plan currently is to run pop-ups. So we will run this for Women's History Month, bleeding into April. And we'll very likely do one for Black History Month, for Hispanic History Month. And it'll be the exact same format, but perhaps in a different neighborhood and with a different list of women. We can fit about 8 women on the tour. And we have a list currently of 60 women that grows every day. So we have a lot to play around with.
So pretty much selling it direct. You're focusing on social media, and that's essentially how you're getting it sold at this point.
Most likely the longer business plan will be B2B. Like, I think private tours is going to be our business, because we can guarantee the size of the group. We can run the private tours anytime. We can get those really nice, yearly returning business. I think that's going to be the core financially of the business, quite frankly. And then these pop-ups for the public facing tours will be for brand awareness, for getting in front of new people, because all these people who come on our tours, they go back. We mentioned at the end of the tour, like, hey, if you have an affinity group at your company, mention this. So we've been able to bring a lot of new people in with this pop-up as we're doing it now.
When you say
I'm
B2B,
still surprised that you think it's so niche. I don't think this is a niche thing. I wonder if you've got yourselves in a bit of bias there, where you've come out thinking it's such a niche thing.
When's the last women's history walking tour you've taken, Christian?
I'm not maybe the best, but if I'm with my family, I could see it.
No, but where were you able to take one? Like, it's a little facetious, but it's a true question. Like, where have you made the book at?
Well, but if it's not available, that's different, right? Like if there was a women's walking tour in every city, that's a viable question, right? Like you guys are creating something.
But there isn't.
There's not.
Yeah.
Right?
And we've had a tour industry for how many years? Hundreds of years? How long? And yet there's never been, there's 2-3 companies that you can name that are doing women's history tours in the US right now. So the fact that, and there's, there's probably a good reason for that. There probably wasn't much demand. I hate to say it. I know it. I love the idea that you think it's not niche. A lot of people still very much hesitate when it's, do I want to do the women's history, or do I want to do, or is that, I would rather everyone's history rather than just women. There's still, I think when you're trying to make a decision of what you're going to do that day, it's not always the women's history tour that's going to come up. I would love to see a world where that is not true at all.
I would be curious on this topic about when you mentioned it to Walks, and did you ever did you talk to them about, can we put this tour in the Walks portfolio and make it one of their tours?
So
and get
we
their
wouldn't want to do that simply from the branding. Like, this is actually going back to that franchise question or license question, is like, we've been having a lot of conversations of what value is a brand, right? What value does that have, and what does that look like? But for Walks and Devour, what's interesting is a lot of the Walks and Devour, just by chance, is like 80% women, 85% women on the leadership. Most of the ground teams are all women. It's a wonderful difference from other companies I worked for in the past. Yeah. And so a lot of these women, when I mention this, they're like, oh, I pitched this. Like, I want to do this in Madrid. I want to do this in London. But going back to this word niche, and maybe we need to define how we're using that word. But that does not work for us in Walks and Devour. You could use it in terms of, if we want to have a brand storytelling piece for PR, like this tour, but that is not where we're going to get our bookings. The amount of resources that we would have to put in at a company like Walks and Devour to develop a tour, to train guides up on a tour, to market a tour, to give it a fair fighting chance, is probably not going to be anywhere near covering the cost of who would actually come in and book that tour compared to our Colosseum tours, our Vatican tours. So I think that's what I'm saying, that it really kind of helps both. It really helps me see how important that delineation is. And in the differentiation, I think there's a lot of these big corporate companies who are trying to be like, how can we be different and how can we differentiate? But I think trying to do it through product is almost not the answer. I think you need to do it through the brand, because you have to, at the end of the day, acknowledge we're all doing this Vatican tour. And that's great, because people want to see the Vatican, and the majority of tours are not great. I've been on more walking tours than any one human should ever go on in a lifetime. And the bar is very low. So how can we instead, and we're having this conversation, we're actually undergoing a rebrand at Walks and Devour, and we're having this conversation of what actually differentiates us, like truly, and what differentiates us in a way that the customers would care about. And that's a very interesting conversation for me. However, for She Shapes History, we have that so magically built in that it is such a strong brand. It is such a strong, it's interesting that CETA is so much the face of this in Australia, and how it's different here. And we've mentioned our networks. I think Beth and I have inevitably become the face of it in the US, and how these two can support each other without really connecting. Like, I don't know how much we're getting from Australia, for example. I don't think, that there was a post on the main She Shapes History account, which is the Australia audience. I don't think we got tons of sales from that or press from that, right? But we're simply, by it existing and by having that strong mission, we are able to then be an extension of that mission and use the same, I don't know, what, do you have a better word for it, Beth? It's like we're able to continue that in a way, as you said before, but in a US model, which has to be different.
Well, and I will add one thing. And also, I have to apologize. Sometimes we really try to get Nikki to like feel inspired about something, but it usually falls pretty
You
short.
picked her as your
You
partner.
know,
so,
I was
I'm
gonna
working
say,
on
like,
it. Like, you know,
I want
she's
to
a
go on
little
a
vanilla.
tour with Nikki.
Yeah. But I know. Don't you like totally want to go on a tour with her now?
Yes.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
I think the other thing to be mindful of that I think is really cool about this is that when people go on these tours, they feel like they're part of this core mission. You know, it's like now you're part of it too. Now you know who these women are. Now your job is to help share their stories and talk about them. And I think to Nikki's point, like having the brand very centered on this mission here, that allows for people to align with the brand in a different way. You know, this isn't like, here's their Women's History Tour. Now let's do this other tour. Now here's this other one that we have. You know, like diversifying via product for this particular type of business doesn't quite work because there is this core alignment with the brand as a mission, as I am now part of this. You know, I also want to help tell these stories now. And so I think that it's unique. I don't know if it would fit into anyone else's portfolio like the same way.
I have to say, I fully agree with you. I mean, I am in a position where I'm buying supply and I look at walking tours all the time. And it's just like, oh, a walking tour. Oh, it's another walking tour. And after a while, there are just so many of those that to stand out as a walking tour is really difficult. I mean, unless it's a food tour that it's like, wow, I really want to try this food, or a wine tour or whatever. But walking tour, I almost feel like you're just better off not even calling it a walking tour, just like you sort of alluded to at the beginning. I think it sounds incredibly intuitive to me, and certainly, I mean, obviously you guys have so much experience at this and know where you're going with it, but it sounds like it makes a lot of sense to me, for sure.
It was hard to find a walking tour 20 years ago. I remember in San Francisco, there was a handful like of edgy ones, but it was hard to find them. But just one thing you also mentioned, I think, Nikki, I've forgotten who mentioned it, which is sad to say, but you said it's non-polarizing. But I don't believe for a second this is polarizing. I think there's 20% of this country that immediately would never, ever go on your tour based on your 20-second introduction. And I also keep thinking of AOC. Why is she not? She should be in here somewhere, right?
I have messaged her. Believe me.
Yeah.
I do think you're right, though, Christian. I think that even actually when Nikki and I, so part of our like founders journey, we flew out to Australia end of last year, and we're like, we just need to go on these tours. You know, we can't possibly start this business without just going on the tours. And I think we were also surprised because we're also, you know, we're trying to be very intentional about really presenting a wide diversity of women. And, you know, and again, if you look at who makes it into history books, okay, so it's white men at the top. And then like if it's any woman, it's a white woman. And we're really trying hard to make sure that various women of color are being included, women with disabilities. And I think because of that, you know, it has definitely come up a couple of times where we've been like, I don't know, do you think like somebody, even going on the tours in Australia, like, oh, do you think somebody would like walk out? You know, like, would somebody be mad? And fortunately, they've had very little of that in Australia. And as far as we've seen too, I think it does tend to be like a self-selecting group of people. So you're right. There are some people that are just never going to go on the tour. And then the people who do go are going to be pretty bought in. So that is fortunate, but yeah.
What cities are they in Australia? Or does it
So
change?
they started in Canberra. Now they're also in Melbourne and Sydney and Wollongong.
Okay.
And anywhere else, Nikki? No.
Those are the currently running ones, except for like sort of specialty museum based or historical entity based ones.
So
It
East
seems
Coast
like
right
such
now.
a no-brainer for like kids, right? Like whether middle school, high school kids, or a teacher to say, and you need to come here and hear this different part of the history that's not in our history books, right? And that would be kind of low-hanging fruit.
We've definitely thought about that too. Yeah, like making a bit of an adjusted version that would go for like an elementary school audience or a middle school audience or parents with their kids. You know, right now it is both of us have small kids. So we also understand that like right now it is a lot of talking. right? It's a lot of like talking out loud about a thing. And so how do you make sure that this is kind of holding the attention of an 8-year-old or a 12-year-old? Some adjustments would need to be made, but I would love to be able to do that.
How about documenting it on a website, so all these women have a profile with any photos that you might have or what you don't have, you could generate with AI,
and
et cetera.
After the plan is we are working on that right now. And at the end of the tour, everyone gets like a postcard with a QR code, and and that kind of has the full list of, okay, who did we mention? Make sure that you can go. So it's not just, oh, you heard it once and then that's it. You can go and actually look at some of those documents that we talked about and see a little bit more and do your own research.
So you do have that on a website, or?
The Australia one does. We don't have ours yet, but it's in the works.
So what's the next city?
We've been getting people reaching out.
I gotta believe you can find plenty of women in Boston that you could talk about.
Oh my gosh,
it's been really interesting. Like we've had people reaching out to us through social media saying, I want to do this. How can I get involved? So I think we definitely want to get New York City up and running to a point where we feel confident, and because we're figuring this out on the fly along with CETA, right? What it looks like and what the legal entity of it is. So I think once we get that down, we have a very long list. New Orleans, someone reached out to us from New Orleans.
Oh yeah. San Francisco, I bet could be really interesting, like the Victorian era. That could be really interesting too. Anyway, I think we're running out of time. Bruce, Christian, either one of you have anything?
I think this is awesome. CETA signed up for the Arrival event in Brisbane in June.
Nice.
I have, as
awesome.
I think you know, Beth, you connected us. I have not talked to her yet, but would love to have her come and speak about this. More excited about it after speaking with both of you about it. Also would love to talk to you both about coming out to Spokane for Arrival and telling your story. And maybe by then you'll have more than one city. So stay tuned for a contact on that. Definitely.
Awesome.
Really interesting, fascinating, and overdue, right? Like you said, like where else can we get a tour like this? And there is a company in Philly.
Yep.
Beyond the Bell Tours in Philadelphia. You have a tour of your own
on LGBTQ in Philly, right? Not just women, but similar but different.
And the more the merrier. I would love to have multiple options in each city.
Right.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Absolutely. Cool.
Yeah, two things. This has been great. Really appreciate this. Bruce should have, I don't know how to spell her name. You should have CETA do a pop-up tour in Brisbane around Arrival. Do like morning before or something.
There you go.
Brisbane's on their roadmap, so I don't know how far along they are, but that would definitely be doable, I'd imagine.
Yeah, and I was just thinking the event next week, it's not the biggest event, but it'd be cool to do like a tour before or after like an industry event in New York City. If there was more time, we could have arranged it for next week, but that'd be really good.
I could do it. I'm here. I'm attending.
Don't you dare challenge Nikki.
I can do it.
Oh, Christian, put that on your list of things to do.
I'm just going to hack into Swap.
Organize that.
If you don't know the right person, if you really want to do it, Nikki, I can get you in touch with Pete, who maybe can help you pull it off.
Well,
it's not going to be Nikki guiding. It's going to be the AI bot that's going to give the tours just to stay on the theme.
Speaking of which, is a self-guided tour that tells the story in the future, or no? Like you really need that tour guide?
It is very participatory. It is very active. Not that wouldn't also help us with the mission of spreading these women's stories, but right now we're really focused on people feeling. At the beginning of the tour, the guide will explain, why they're here and why they're doing it. And I've been saying, I started this with Beth because right now in today's world, I just want to feel like I'm doing something. I feel so helpless. And this feels like I'm doing something. And when people are on this tour, you could see it. They do too. It's small, but hearing these women's stories and then becoming the keeper of these stories and having to spread them yourself, that is something. And I think that's something really important for us right now to experience in person.
Yeah.
I've got a 20-second quick fire, which we can all do. Nikki, you're going to like this one. What's the best city in the world for pizza? Is it A, Chicago, B, Naples, or C, Philadelphia?
He kills me. It's the same one, Christian. You got to get a new top question.
It's been so
I
many
can't
years
ignore
Nick,
the
since I asked you the
question
question.
again.
He's asked you
Wait,
that
I
before?
cannot answer this question though.
I
have a
abstain
different
based
city
on
I
a bad
can
question.
definitely answer it. Hands down, Naples.
I mean,
without
okay,
question.
I don't disagree with you. I think Italian pizza is like the greatest. So Naples. However, as a former Chicagoan who lived there for 5 years, I feel like Chicago pizza is like a whole other level. Like I wouldn't even call it pizza. I call it pizza
It's not
casserole.
Yeah,
It's
it's a
different.
Yeah.
casserole.
Yeah, it's pizza casserole. So like pizza in Naples, pizza casserole in Chicago. Done.
New Haven, Connecticut.
Apparently is the world's
Honorable
best pizza.
mention.
Amazing
Mystic Pizza.
Amazing pizza. The 3 shops there to do it. 2 of them owned by the mafia, literally. And there's a back
That's why it's
door
so
to get
good.
away from the 2
I need to get the name of that place, Bruce. But sitting
Peppi's.
in old Naples is just with the oh no, you can't even.
Yeah.
Perfect.
The fresh everything. Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, well, it was really a pleasure having you both on our show, and good luck with everything. Can't wait to watch what happens, and I can't wait to take a tour. Actually, I'm really
Please let us know next time
come
you're in the
on
city.
over.
Take that train down.
100%.
How often
All right.
are they? You have the public tours? Are they regular?
Once a
now or what?
weekend. Yeah,
Once
for
a
the
weekend.
next few weeks, once a weekend.
Okay. Oh, next few weeks because it's Women's History Month. And
Yep.
then the next month, they won't be once a weekend.
Then
They're
it'll just be we're running private tours
private.
in between until we do the next pop-up.
Got it.
Perfect. All right,
Cool.
cool.
All right.
Thanks,
guys.
everyone.
Bye-bye. Good
Thank
luck.
you. All right. And we have